It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 654 of Accelerate. That's episode 654 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Now, before I talk about my guests coming up for today's show, let me share with you some of the exciting changes that I'm making to Accelerate. In fact, changes that start with this episode here today. The first change is that instead of releasing 3 new episodes of Accelerate every week, I am consolidating that down into a single new show that'll be released every Wednesday. And perhaps the biggest change is that instead of having just a single guest on each show, you're going to hear my conversations with at least 2 guests on every episode. So, Accelerate is the podcast that every expert wants to be on. And I have a great list of the best and brightest in sales, leadership, management, marketing that are lined up to share their information with you, which means I'm looking forward to continuing to bring you in-depth conversations with a lot of really smart, interesting people. And for those hardcore fans of my Friday talks with my fearless co-host, Bridget Gleason, fear not. Each new episode of Accelerate, just like this one, will feature a conversation with Bridget, or Captain Fantastic, as loyal listeners know her. Now, with more guests per show, these new episodes are going to run a little bit longer as we pack more goodness into each one. And I appreciate your support as we work hard to help you increase your sales readiness, help you stay relevant to your buyers in the face of the constant barrage of changes driven by technological innovation and changes in how our buyers do business. So again, I look forward to having you continue to join me on this journey of learning and discovery that I call Accelerate, as we provide an even bigger and better experience for you. Okay, first up on Accelerate this week is Steve Preston. He's the Chief Marketing Officer at QStream. And in this episode, we're going to talk about proficiency. Now, we talk a lot in sales about productivity, but as Steve points out, a key to productivity is proficiency. In our conversation, Steve, we're going to explore this notion of what proficiency means and what it means in the context of selling. And we're going to discuss why the ability to measure proficiency at an individual level is an important step in elevating and maintaining the readiness of your sales team. Make sure you stick around and check this out. So let me remind you that today's show is brought to you in part by our friends at Discover.org. The Discover.org platform is a game changer for sales and marketing professionals. This feature-rich sales intelligence platform is supported by over 250 researchers who continually update contact data and provide account-specific insights to help sales and marketing teams break ahead of the pack. See the product at discover.org.com/schedule-demo. That's discover.org.com/schedule-demo. As always, if you'd like to see show notes for this episode, go to andypaul.com/654. We'll provide a breakdown of this and all the conversations on Accelerate. All right, let's jump into Steve Preston. Welcome to the show.
I'm well, thanks, Andy. How are you?
Good. You said you're just fresh off the beaches in Florida.
Yes, sir. From white sand to white snow.
White sand to white snow in Boston. Yep. Very nice. Yeah. Very nice. All right. For people who aren't familiar with QStream, give us a brief background on what they do.
QStream created software that kind of taps into how people think and how they learn. What I mean by that is they deliver information, little bits, bite-sized chunks to help people retain information. So obviously it's delivered to a mobile device and spaced out and delivered in a way that people can engage with and interact with. And basically it improves knowledge retention by 170%, and it actually can change behavior. It's kind of a different thing altogether. We've been around for 9 years, and we mostly focus on sales enablement, but it really could be used for any knowledge worker.
Right. So just make sure people understand is if you're a QStream customer, you are, let's say you've got a field sales force, you are pushing out to them on a periodic basis, short little quizzes, I guess, right? Mm-hmm. That help, reinforce knowledge or teach them something new, and more of a situational. Yeah. It seems like.
Yeah, it's 1 to 2 minutes a day, nice and lightweight. You get a QStream or a little bit, maybe once a day or every other day. They are in the form of a question or a challenge, because that's actually more effective when you think about it in life, right? You'll try something, you'll make a mistake, you'll get some coaching, and it sticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus a lecture and a test, right? Is kind of the traditional way. Basically, it doesn't work that well, right? So it does get presented as a challenge or a question or a situation to respond to, which sets up that learning moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I might put you in a situation, have you respond to it. You'll respond to it and say, all right, 20% of you answered this way, 30% answered that way. Here's a lesson on how you could respond to that situation. And that could be in text or video, whatever. And then, if you get it right, it'll ask you again. If you get it wrong, it'll ask you again. Right. And it'll keep on asking you until you get it right twice in succession. So the algorithm understands how to space it and how to deliver those challenges.
No, it's delivered one right after another, or that's spaced out.
No, you get one a day. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you're done, you're done. But when you get the challenge right, you'll still get asked again, maybe in a few days.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get that right twice in succession, it'll take that question out of the sequence. And if you don't get it right, it'll ask you again. So that's the algorithm in the background understands how to time it and how to space those questions to make sure it sticks.
Okay. So in a broader sense, you could say, look, we've got a sales enablement team maybe, or sales ops team that owns this inside.
That's right.
They're creating, a cadence of knowledge acquisition, I'll call it, or questions that you're going to push out.
Yep.
And it could be, hey, we've got a new campaign running. We're pushing this particular product or this offer. We want to make sure they understand the offer.
That's right. A lot of times it gets used for reinforcement, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. Sales kickoffs, product launches, and things like that you'll do a traditional session, like in a classroom setting, and you'll have breakout groups and so on and so forth. And then they'll send QStreams to reinforce. Because people understand the forgetting curve, right? You'll go through these sessions, you forget 80% of what you learn shortly after you've learned it. This addresses that issue, right? So it helps you retain the information you've learned.
And that's an interesting question. So without being redundant about saying questions, is one question a day enough? One QStream a day enough? What do you call them questions? You call them a QStream or Q? Or
QStreams. We call them QStreams. People call them QStreams, so that's what they are, right?
Yeah. So is one a day enough? I mean, if you just had a sales kickoff event and a lot of things were covered.
Well, 1 to 2 a day. More than that gets to be too much. You can enroll in more. I mean, it's really kind of what your appetite is for these kinds of questions, but you got to be careful not to burn people out, and to saturate with them with too much. But it is actually. So a session of QStreams or questions or challenges will be somewhere around 16, no more than 20, covering certain topics.
Over a certain period of time.
That's right.
Okay. So really, if you're looking at implementing something like that, it's, you do sort of look at it almost like on a campaign basis, right?
Yeah.
We've got this chapter, or this campaign, or this body of knowledge we're trying to reinforce. And so we'll set up the QStream. Now, do companies run them, multiple simultaneously, or again, do you run into that overwhelm issue? Yeah,
that's the best way to do it. No, as a matter of fact, the best practice would be to create themes or cohorts, right? Because every rep is different. They're going to be challenged in different part of the sales cycle. It's one thing to reinforce product knowledge on a new product launch, or to reinforce a sales methodology, or to launch a sales methodology, right? You can always reinforce those things.
Sure.
But on an ongoing basis, when you think about it, some reps are really good at discovery. Others are really good at product knowledge and specs. Some are good at negotiating. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. So you could run this on an ongoing basis, understanding who needs to be supported in which area of the sales cycle. And it could be ongoing.
So you can actually tailor by the individual what questions they're going to receive. You
can tailor them by the individual. You can tailor them by the groups.
Interesting.
It's probably more effective to create teams or groups, right? And the reason that works well is because not only the questions get sent out, but we use game mechanics to help drive up engagement. So in other words, if we're in a team, let's say we're in the German team in Europe, right? You can set up the German team versus the UK team, and you can
not that we're mirroring two world wars or anything.
No. Okay. So, yeah, and we can have those teams compete, and you can have a leaderboard. So that's really interesting. So not only to see how you did, you can see how you did against your peers, or you can see how your team did versus another team.
Got it.
So it's more engaging when you create groups and teams.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think it's a really interesting idea for, and I've had Duncan on the show a couple times.
Yeah.
We've spoken about this, or been on Accelerate a couple times. So, yeah, it seems like, so one of the things that that you're working on now that one of your folks alerted me to was this idea of sort of a new metric, if you will, in sales, which you're calling proficiency. Yep. And yeah, there's a lot of talk around sales readiness and so on. I mean, does proficiency, is that sales readiness, or is there something more or less in proficiency than sort of the talk you're hearing about sales readiness? Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. I mean, it's a really simple concept, frankly, but I think it's very powerful too. You think about a typical sales team, right? And let's assume they're using a CRM system. For the sake of argument, they're using Salesforce, right? Now, just about every sales team, they have sales stages, right? And things that you should do during each stage. Now, depending on the industry and the company, there may be 3 stages, such as pharmaceutical is very compressed and really within a 15-minute time frame, right? They kind of go through 3 phases. Or software tech may have 5 or 6 stages, and that could span 6 months or 3 months or whatever. But the point is you have different stages, and there are things you're supposed to do during each stage. So in the earlier stages, you should have discovery conversations, right? You should know the market you're going after, the persona you're going to speak to, and have discovery. And your job is to convert a prospect into an opportunity, right? Then in the middle stages, you demo when you present, or you deliver a value proposition, and you do more deeper discovery around a business opportunity, a value proposition. And then eventually you close and you go through T's and C's and so forth. But the point is all of those activities, all of those stages are defined. And you typically will have stage criteria and things you do during that stage, right? So theoretically, you have all these reps are doing the same thing, right? During the different stages.
Theoretically, yes.
Right. But if you hold to that and say, theoretically, if they're all doing the same thing, why aren't they getting the same results? Right. So on the other end of CRM, you're tracking outcomes, stage conversion, close rates, average deal size, stage velocity. I mean, those are the metrics sales really cares about, right? Quota attainment, pipeline volume, pipeline velocity, pipeline conversion. They're probably about 5 KPIs that a sales exec truly cares about. That's what they're forecasting against. So the things that people are doing and the results. Well, we all know that better reps get better results than bad reps, right? It's because they're more proficient. They do those things better than others. It's really simple, right? I mean, everybody knows that intuitively. Reps that are better at discovery create more quality pipeline and are more predictable at forecasting the business than ones that don't, right?
Well, possibly, yeah.
Enablement, we do this thematically across all stages, and we're not aligning or measuring their readiness, right? Their proficiency of doing those things in the stages to the business outcome of that stage. So we're really simply saying is get a tighter alignment and a correlation between how good you are at doing those things and your business outcomes. So it should stand to reason that your top 20% performers should be somewhere in the top 20% most proficient during different stages. So we're not talking about causation. It's not dials. You turn the proficiency dial up, you get more bookings. It's not like that at all, right? But it's a great way, powerful way for sales enablement to start to track and measure what they're doing and what the actual business outcome is, or what they're influencing. Is probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, I think that's right. I mean, I think that there are some missing variables in there, but because like, for instance, one of the things that you see in many companies is, and not to go down a rabbit hole on this, but is that managers tend to give better leads to top performers, so thus the criticality of discovery is still, while still important, you're getting people that are essentially more pre-qualified, and these things start becoming self-perpetuating, so that the top 20% are always dealing in a sort of more enlightened sphere than the next 20% that aren't being given the cherry-picked leads and so on and so forth. So if you create environments that handle everybody in a completely equal fashion, then what you're saying is absolutely true.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean,
absent that, you're mostly right. So,
well, I've seen situations where a rep gets, puts up great numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And they go to club and they crush their quota and so on and so forth. And you could assume that they're really good reps. And sometimes they are. Sometimes they're just in a great patch, right?
Absolutely.
And they have tremendous leads. Now, I've seen cases where the rep, like I said, is crushing it, and they're actually not a very good rep, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're very transactional. They have so many leads. They're just demo quote, demo quote, demo quote, and they're working the numbers and they're getting these results. And because you don't have that extra dimension, that actual visibility into how good they are doing these things, you're lacking that insight. You could split that territory, for example, right, and get more yield out of that territory, and coach the reps up on being better sales reps, and
exactly,
double your output, give or take, right?
Theoretically,
in that region, right? So just having that extra dimension is really powerful. There are other cases where you see someone who kind of the opposite, right, is struggling at the top of the funnel. And you think maybe they're not doing really well at discovery. In fact, they demonstrate that they have good skills there. They legitimately don't have enough pipeline or enough lead flow in their territory. So like I said, it's an extra layer of visibility, and it's something that sales enablement can use proactively. So, there's always a challenge of where do you aim, right? Where do you aim your efforts and your resources? And a lot of times you get caught in this reactive mode, right? A competitive kill campaign or a product launch. And that's all well and good. But when Sales Enable comes back and they say, we're helping sales generate more revenue, they don't have any credibility because they can't connect the dots between what they're doing and what the outcome is, because the metrics are too high level. More revenue, higher close rates. I mean, that's good. Yeah. You like to think that, but how can you actually prove that?
Well, the thing with all those metrics, what they haven't proven is that they actually increase real productivity. And, this is one of the issues. I mean, and I want to talk about productivity coming up, because you mentioned it in one slide that was interesting, that you have sort of this equation with, productivity leads to a missing link, you called it, leads to increased performance, and that missing link being proficiency. So proficiency, is it, let's sort of wrap up on that a little bit. Is that just skills? Because to me, it's proficiency is both tangible and intangible. So how do you measure the intangibles?
Well, say more to that. What do you mean exactly?
Well, I mean, some of the intangibles they're extremely important. Is this person have a facility for being able to connect and engage and inspire prospects to take that next step? Are they are they good at small talk? Are they things that make a difference in terms of building trust and the initial stages of the relationship, as well as ongoing part of the relationship, versus the tangible, which is product knowledge, customer knowledge, things we spoke about before. So how do you factor both tangible and intangible, or is it not possible? Is really proficiency at this point, we're really just focused on the tangible skills?
I love that question, actually.
That's why you come here.
Yeah.
It's for the great questions.
Well, you want to hear something kind of nerdy? It really is. But the tangible and intangible, it's different parts of your brain are at play there. So sure. Your prefrontal cortex is product knowledge, specs. It's how, it's book memory, if you will, right? Basal ganglia is soft skills, right? Eye contact, reading a situation, that sort of thing. And those two brains learn differently, right? The prefrontal cortex is a little more traditional, more passive, memorization, repetition, where basal ganglia, just like,
that's the primitive part of the brain.
Yeah, it's a little more central, more primitive, and it's all like really quick, instant feedback. and people know in everyday life, if I said something offensive, I get immediate feedback. If I had any emotional intelligence anymore, I'd pick up on that, and or if I sensed a room, I'd know what to say. And
you're not saying you lost all your emotional intelligence, are you?
No, I didn't. But we know people who have, right?
We do.
People
Yes.
who are very, very smart and just can't read a room or can't do that. What's interesting is that the basal ganglia is very tuned into QStream. When I talked about knowledge retention and behavior change, those are two different effects that QStream was tested against.
Right.
So now I'm not saying you use QStream in your behavior changes, but it's very much in line. Quick bits of information, immediate feedback. So you're right. I mean, you have to train both parts of your brain. And you can do that. You'd use different methods. So what I'd say is the prefrontal cortex, the, product specs, features and functions, competitive analysis, so on and so forth. You could use QStream to reinforce that kind of training at initially more passive. And then you could actually reinforce or help with the emotional intelligence part of being a good sales rep by providing situations for them to respond to and giving them immediate feedback. Kind of helps you practice that part of the skill set that you're right, you need, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess the question is, are any of your customers doing that part of it? Or are they mostly focused on the tangible?
I think they focus on the tangible. I think others do it better. I think it depends on the industry.
Right.
So for example, pharmaceutical is very much about and should be about compliance, being on message, selling the right product at the right time. It's very fact-based, and that'd be more reinforcement about the product, right?
Yeah, but the whole industry has been shifted from a regulation standpoint to take the emotion and the sales out of it.
Yeah, that's right. So I think it depends, and I think many of them, all of them use it for reinforcement of knowledge, right? And some of them use it to develop soft skills. But let's face it, you do that in real time with workshops and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, I think there's really an interesting thought, because it just sort of occurred to me during our conversation here about using a tool like QStream for that behavior change, more the intangible. It seems like it'd be interesting to measure. Because one of the things, like when we recruit and hire salespeople, is I rarely ever see a company that says, "Yeah, we really look at values and character," right? When we're hiring people, the obligatory, we think they're honest type thing, but there's no real examination of sort of those basic human qualities that make up a person that really do dictate to some degree how well they'll perform.
Right. The interesting thing is, you may already know this because you've talked to Duncan, but the technology and the algorithm have gone through clinical trials.
Yeah.
And one of the clinical trials that was connected to behavior change was done with diabetics. It really had nothing to do with selling.
Right.
Maybe the diabetics were salespeople, for all I know, but it was really about diabetes and not selling.
Behavior changes
their behavior, right?
Right.
Their behavior, and they actually showed health changes, right, in terms of the way they took care of themselves and their diet and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I think that studies I've read, reporting on about similar things, is that in the medical field, and I think this does apply to learning in any environment, behavior change in any environment, is what they found is that sort of the short, repeated interventions, which I'll call QStream an intervention, situational, are hugely effective. We're finding in healthcare that one of the most important things for controlling diabetes is, they have people will go by home health assistants, whatever they call them, who work for the insurance companies, go by patients' homes and say, "Are you taking your medication? Are you watching what?" And they look at what's in the refrigerator, and it's like huge impact, rather than doctor's visits and so on. So I think behavior change is really, really useful. I can see where they, in a diabetes environment, what you eat, so on and so forth, very important.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously a tie to proficiency and productivity, but so one of my favorite topics I like to ask guests and sort of spring on them is, what is productivity in sales?
That's a nice question. Well, there are tons of tools out there, right, that that remove the wasted motion, some of the wasted motion, right? I'd say if you have an inside sales force that is calling and emailing, and you're not using some kind of dialer technology, then you're way behind the curve, right? So productivity in terms of taking away all the extra steps of dialing the phone, leaving a voicemail, putting in a CRM that you dialed the phone, that you left a voicemail, a follow-up task, blah, 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 right? All that administrative time rather than time, hopefully, talking to prospects or talking to customers,
right,
is, investment made there is our dollars well spent. And I'm, as a consumer, right, I'm not really in let's say QStream really isn't the sales productivity end of this, but I run a BDR team, and I have for years, right? So I look at those tools as, being kind of a blessing, because not only are you getting more activity out of the rep, but you get more insight into what they're doing. So if I look at a BDR team, again, ultimately I look at their output. So for, their top of the funnel guys that
right.
So let's say if I put a goal out there of, say, five sales accepted leads a week, it's a pretty aggressive goal.
Per BDR, right?
Per BDR. If I'm hitting that number, I kind of don't care what they did, how they got there, right? But if they're not hitting the number, and then the first thing I'll look at is I'll use some of those indicators as some measure of effort. How many calls they're making, how many emails they're sending. And if they seem to be hitting and doing all those things, the next thing I'm going to look at is whether or not they're good at doing those things. So,
right.
I think sales productivity, an analyst I really like once said, if you get someone to make 100 mediocre dials a day, right, you're really not getting much out of that investment. So making them more efficient is obvious. You need to do that. And getting most use of their time and giving them the insight and the tools they need to make the dials, make the calls, be on message, do a good job of discovering, or at least have a discovery call and get them as many at-bats as possible is sort of those. I'd say those are table stakes, but it gets down to the quality of the engagement. I'm going back to proficiency, right?
Well, which is something that, quite honestly, certainly in many SaaS companies, is the quality is sacrificed for quantity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I asked the question about productivity, because, granted, there's some companies doing quite well, focus more on anomaly on quality versus quantity. But one of the things the tools have enabled is really taking a lot of the focus off quality, because before you had all the tools and the dialers and so on that enable you to make all these calls, you had to harvest a higher fraction of the calls that you made in order to make your numbers. Right. But now, the tools, I don't want to say they encourage a little bit of lazy, sloppy behavior, but that's what we see.
Yeah. And what's interesting is if you take that part of the sales stack, right, the dialers, even sales asset management, right, in a way, and you say, okay, during the sales process, I'm going to deliver all the resource that reps need to take the thinking out of the process, right? I'm going to tell them who to dial, when to dial. I'm going to record the conversations, tell them what conversations are good and which conversations are bad. When they go through the sales process, I'm going to deliver the cheat sheets and the case studies and the scripts and so on and so forth.
After
templates,
right? Yeah. After the A is accepted the lead, right?
Yeah, throughout the process, I'm going to deliver the right resources at the right time. And then when I start to track it, I'm tracking activities, and I track whether or not a sales rep downloaded a document, read the document, got all the way through the video, halfway through the video or the tutorial. So I can kind of track what they're doing, but I'm not. Again, I still think that's incomplete. I keep hammering at proficiency, and I'm not saying that's the end all, but you need better visibility. You talked about the quality of the call, the quality of what they're doing. And that comes down to, I use, if you don't mind a metaphor here, right?
No, I love metaphors.
I play music. All right.
What do you play?
I'm a drummer.
Okay.
And I've been drumming my whole life. All right. No drumming jokes. No drummer jokes.
No drumming jokes.
I've heard them all.
You're not my neighbor. That's fine.
So I'll give you an example. And I studied seriously for quite a while too. If you put a piece of music in front of me, now I'm consciously incompetent, right? I know I don't know that song, so now I have the music. Now there's this whole time where I'm practicing the piece, reading the sheet music, marking out different bars that I'm struggling on by myself in solitude, until I get, consciously competent. In other words, I'm in the studio by myself and I can play the piece from beginning to end. There's a big difference between that and being on stage, right? Where something happens, right? Something happens with the sound system, someone makes a noise, or, and I can play that song, the building could fall down, and I can play that song flawlessly, and I get beyond playing it flawlessly, and now I start listening to the musicians around me, and now it's musical. That being fluent,
unconscious mastery at that point.
Yeah, mastery. Yeah, that's behavior change to me. So when now suddenly, whatever it is you're doing is ingrained, and you're actually having that, you're experiencing that. It doesn't have to be music. I mean, you could see that's just life, right?
Well, sales, right?
Sales. Do you see people who do a product demonstration, and God forbid they go off course? It's game over. Others, it's their plaything, right?
Well, I think that one of the things that
they use it to qualify and interact and engage. That's mastery, right? That to me, that's you've crossed the boundary into being proficient, right? On that demo.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too. I mean, I think that I love the word you used is talked about consciously incompetent requires a degree of. I mean, we're all in that situation, right? Anything new that we encounter requires a certain degree of self-examination to acknowledge that we are consciously incompetent in something. But yeah, no, I think that's a great progression. I like the word play between consciously incompetent to unconscious mastery.
Yeah, right.
Because that does go well. And so here's the question: and it's unfortunately we're sort of having to wrap up, but for somebody that and a lot of companies, a lot of my audience, we have small, mid-sized enterprises, sales leaders, CEOs, and so on. If they don't have your tool, if they're not using QStream, how do they go about measuring proficiency?
They could do it. You could do it. The problem is you have to be respectful of sales reps' time, right? So the guidance I offer our customers and anyone who wants to listen is, you start with the metrics that sales cares about the most, right? And it may be quota attainment, but really you get down to the next level. It's like, what's keeping you from hitting a quota? And it seems that every sales team has that stage that's their bugaboo, stage 2, stage 3, whatever it is. We're not generating enough value. Our close rates aren't good. We're getting beat by the competitor. You can identify one of 2 stages that really give you a lot of heartburn. Then look at the skills required. Then start to narrow down what you're going to do about it. And say, if I improve this metric, if we get from this scale of proficiency, say 30% proficient to 60% or 70 or 80% proficient, because that's our best, those are our leaders.
Right.
Then this will generate this kind of metric, either it's pipeline conversion rate or close rate or so forth. Now you're asking, how do you do that without using QStream? You could use a survey, right? But the problem with a survey is there's no value exchange, right? You're just
it's taking self-assessment too.
Yeah. But you're taking the reps' time out of the field. They give marketing or sales enablement information. They get nothing in return. What QStream does that's really nice is that while you're learning, you're declaring what your strengths and weaknesses are. So we can see heat maps of where people are while they're going through the process. And it's, again, 1 or 2 minutes a day. So there's a value exchange, right? You could do it during your own time, while you're waiting in Starbucks or whatever, getting a coffee. Right. And while you're going through the process, we can show the business where your hot zones are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you need to work on. And that's a little more in line. So there are other ways to do it. They're just not as slick, right? They're more disruptive, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem with it is if you're asking reps to self-assess, you're probably just as accurate just doing an eyeball thumb test. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Because that's the trouble. It's too much of the data we get in sales anyway, even gathered by some of the big research firms, it's self-reported by. It's not observational. It's self-reported from the companies they're surveying. So we have that sort of gap of real good data about what really happens in sales. And I think to your point too earlier about the stages and trying to really isolate the proficiency. I think where I think one of the issues, I think a challenge for companies is that we may say, we're having a problem in migrating out of discovery into the next phase.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the problem must be in discovery. But the challenge is the problem's really not in discovery. It was in stage one, connecting, engaging, and building trust, because you haven't built trust. The customer's not going to reveal the data that you need to have. They don't feel comfortable. They're not telling you to go away because customers rarely ever tell, or buyers rarely ever tell people to go away at that stage. They'll stop talking to you or do something at some point. But you might say, this person, we're going to drill down and really start working with them. It's like, no. It's like way back here. Yeah. Our issue is a trust issue. It's not that we can't ask the right questions. And that's the thing I always try to caution companies about is you may identify a problem using your data in one area. Look 2 steps before that, because that's really where the problem is. Yeah,
I completely agree. I mean, some of that data can be really misleading. So
it is the problem.
Yeah, to build off what you just said. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, 3 stages. I mean, let's say it's 6 really, but it's early, mid, late, right? Mm-hmm. And we see a rep that seems to be doing better than the benchmark at discovering and moving opportunities from early to mid, right? Now, at face value, you get 2 different reads on that, right? The glasses half full guy will say, Andy's really good at discovery. He's creating more value in the pipeline. Glasses half empty guy will say, Andy has happy ears, and those aren't real opportunities. Mm-hmm. So if you look further down the funnel, you'd say, well, let's see what the next stage looks like, the mid stage. And let's say your close rate is lower than the benchmark. Well, glasses half full guy will say, boy, those are real opportunities. Andy needs to learn the product. We're leaving money on the table. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know that mid-stage criteria very well. Glasses half empty guy will say, see, that was happy ears. Those aren't real opportunities. And they never closed in the first place. So both of those scenarios are right. But you have no insight. So if you're just looking at activities and outcomes, you just know that Andy's different. You don't know what the root cause is. So if you had proficiency layered on top of that, and you saw that Andy is below benchmark at discovery and at benchmark at the mid-stage criteria, it's more likely that it's happy ears, that you're not connecting, that you're not listening, that those aren't real opportunities, and that's exposing the business to forecasting risk because those aren't real opportunities, right? Versus Andy's very good at discovery and he's very engaging, and those are good opportunities. He's weak on the product, or he's getting beat up by the competitor, and he competes on price or whatever because of the criteria downstage. So without having a read on what your strengths and weaknesses are, the other data you're collecting in the CRM is obviously it's useful, but it kind of leaves you wanting. It's hard to diagnose what's really going on. Now think about rolling that up, right, by regions and reps. That becomes very material.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good thing to wrap up on, as Steve was just saying, is for those of you watching or listening to this, is that he's talking about that's a new set of metrics, which we started in the beginning, that just sort of overlay the metrics the key metrics you're looking at that give you context. Because one of the problems is that we addressed earlier is that we're just not very good, collectively sales management, not very good at using the data that we're getting, right? Do we make correlations that don't exist, or we see causation where there's only correlation, whatever. And this is, proficiency to me is, you talk to sort of data scientists and you look at things like that. It's like, well, what are the missing variables? What's the context for the variables? And I think proficiency is something that starts giving you some context.
Yeah.
So,
well said. Yep.
Yeah. So I think for people who are sort of looking at something like that might be able to help them, then Steve's going to tell you how to get in touch with QStream and him.
Well, just visit our website, www.qstream.com. Look for, we're actually going to run a webinar on this topic, and I'll get a little more specific and offer some guidance on how you can do that. That's coming up, I believe it's in the middle of next week. I think it's...
Okay. Well, this will be published after that. So
yeah. Okay. Well,
go to their site. I'm sure it's been recorded.
It'll be recorded.
Right.
And there are plenty of papers written on it. There are lots of resources, or you could just contact me directly, steve.preston@qstream.com.
Excellent. Well, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Great time.
Thank you again, Steve. That was Steve Preston, CMO of QStream. Up next, it's time for another conversation with my fantastic co-host, Bridget Gleason, making her way to Wednesday from Fridays. Now, before I welcome Bridget in, we need to do a little business. Now, friends, every week I hear from at least one listener who's looking for that new sales challenge. And my advice to them is one of the most important elements to your success is to make sure that you exercise your skills and your talents for the right company. That means one that values its employees and its customers, and is a company that's a category leader. Has a deep portfolio of category-leading products. So with its recent acquisition of Level 3, the new CenturyLink is a world leader in providing cloud, security, real-time communications, hybrid IT, and managed services. So if you're a top sales producer and you're looking to challenge yourself in order to take your career to the next level, then visit CenturyLink.com/accelerate and join their talent community and see if CenturyLink is the right step for you and your career. All right, up next here is Bridget. And today we're going to dive into the significant differences between managing, coaching, and mentoring. Now, top sales managers are usually adept at all three. In fact, as Bridget and I get into it, it takes all three, managing, coaching, and mentoring, to develop your sales team and help them derive the maximum benefit from their skills and their talents. So let's jump into it with Captain Fantastic.
Bridget, how are you doing?
Andy. Fantastic.
Well, that's
all good.
All good. Even though it's getting near the end, well, as we record this, it's near the end of your quarter and you're feeling stressed.
You know what? Here's how I feel about it. It's it's a good kind of stress, though. We've got the deals there. We've got them there. It's just getting them over the line. And some of them are sitting in various stages of procurement or just finishing the technical sort of specifications.
Mm-hmm.
So go to budgeting, but we're in a good place. We've got some good deals to bring in, but I feel stressed, but in a, we can do this. We got it.
We got it. Yeah.
It's in a kind of a, we got it, but we got to do it. We got to do it, but we got it.
At least you're not like some sales teams that get to this point in the quarter, a couple weeks before the end of the quarter, and it's like they don't even have all the opportunities identified yet.
Well, and I've been there.
Yeah, haven't we all?
I've been there where I'm looking at it saying, oh God, okay, so we're close, and we know that some opportunities show up mid-quarter, and we're toward the end of the quarter, and we can close them. Some of them have short sales cycles. Let's hope we get a couple of those, and we've done it. But that's a different kind of stress. That's a Hail Mary kind of stress. And I'd much prefer that we need to execute. We've got some good buffer. So, there are 18 different ways to get to the number. And, so we just kind of keep rolling.
9 ways to skin a cat.
That's right.
All right. Well, good luck on that. And so in this episode, we're going to talk about managing, coaching, and actually I don't want to say a new term, but one we don't hear about much in sales is mentoring. And I was reading something not that long ago and having a lot of discussions with sales leaders. And when I ask them about what coaching is, for them, the difference between managing and coaching, it's like, seems like something missing, because there is a definition I read somewhere, and I paraphrased it. They're saying managing is about coordinating and directing the activities of a team. And this said coaching is about developing and elevating the skills of the individual. But when I hear most sales leaders recently talk about coaching, what they're really referring to is like tactical deal coaching, right? We've got these things we need to accomplish. Here's the strategies for going to go do that. And this whole idea about developing and elevating the skills of the individual through one-on-one interactions seems to disappear. So what I was thinking is I think it's time we bring mentoring into the equation for sales. We're really talking about 3 sort of levels of responsibility: managing, coaching, and mentoring. Where managing is about coordinating and directing the activities of the team. Coaching is about defining, these strategies, these situational situations, Department of Redundancy Department. And mentoring, is about developing and elevating the skills of the individual. So does that make sense to you?
It does. It does make sense to me. I think about managing. Managing to me is, I think about managing sort of like a super tactical and that when I think about managing, I think about kind of the overall coordination of the system.
The team, right.
The team, the system, the inputs, the outputs, the conversions between stages, and making sure it operates as a holistic unit. So I think that I look at the managing as more of a system, and I think it's very important. I look at coaching, I look at that as, skill related, deal related, just very much in the moment, in the quarter, in the deal.
In the moment, yes.
In the moment. And then mentoring is, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your career? What do you want it to feel like? What do you want it to look like? What are the gaps that you see that you have, and how can I help you get those experiences to fill those gaps? So it's for me, when I think about mentoring, it's how do I help the people who I'm mentoring to realize some greater, grander version of themselves that they want to be personally and professionally.
And that's the part that, to my experience, and certainly what I'm seeing in sales leaders these days, is that's the part that's getting short shrift. And this is the part that, to me, is the part that really builds loyalty, builds a sense that, the company I'm working for and the person I'm working for cares about me as an individual, and helps you sort of get that extra level of commitment that you're not getting because they care. I mean, we all know the cliche is, employees say about a boss, "I don't care what you know till I know that you care," right?
Yeah.
But in fact, it's a cliche. It doesn't mean it's not true. And I think a lot of employees think that way. And the studies come out and show that the primary reason most employees leave a company, and certainly I'm sure this is true in sales, by an overwhelming majority, is their manager. And so if the manager only focuses on management, as we talked about, and coaching, sort of in the moment, situational, tactical, do this, do that, and not paying attention to the individual, then people start thinking, well, they don't really care about me.
Yeah, well, they're not. They're not. They think that because they're not. They're caring about the deal. They're caring about the number. And those things are important. But at the end of the day, there are people that are driving these things. You're probably the same. I care deeply about the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had this conversation more than once this week. And at the end, as we talked about earlier, of a quarter when deals are important, that I tell my team, listen, individuals, I care about you. That's what I care about. And if I do right by you and help you go and achieve what you want to achieve and help you grow in the way that you want to grow. If that's my focus, everything with Logs.io gets taken care of. It really does. If I just keep, it's sort of like we talk about as a salesperson's responsibility is to feel that way about a customer and a prospect. Let me do right by the prospect and everything's going to take care of itself. Logs.io will get taken care of if I do right by the prospect, if I do right by the customer. And so I feel the same with people on my team. If I do right by them and I care about them and help them grow, Logs.io is going to come out great. We'll do great.
So how do you sort of split your time between the three? Between managing, coaching, and mentoring. And are you conscious of splitting your time and saying, I need to set aside time for mentoring people as opposed to, hey, what have you done for me today?
Yeah, so if I think about just broadly how it falls out, I would say managing is I'm looking at Salesforce, I'm looking at reports, I'm looking at data, I'm looking at stats. We're talking about it at team meetings. Mm-hmm. In our one-on-ones, some of it may come out, but there's work that I do behind the scenes to help me be a better manager. We talk about it in team meetings. I have people who report to me that do a lot of one-on-one managing, actually. So mine isn't all frontline, mm-hmm. Although I try to stay connected. So I would say some of it, that's where the managing. The coaching and the mentoring in the one-on-ones, the two come together. Now, they're not necessarily intertwined in a particular conversation. So, for example, I may talk to a rep about the 3 or 4 deals that they have to close. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk, and that's where a lot of coaching is. And we'll talk a lot about deal structure and what should it look like. And no, I don't think you should do that. Okay, so there's a lot of coaching that happens there. But almost every one-on-one, I would say 8 out of 10, there's a conversation about, and it may be 5 minutes, because it's on my mind.
Well, and I was going to say, you bring it up probably more often than I do.
I always bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
So if they bring it up, I feel like I've missed something. Like if they have to bring it up and they feel like I've missed it or I'm not paying attention, I feel like I missed something. Not always. Like there was a situation where we have sort of a mid-market, low enterprise team, and we brought in our first really true field enterprise rep. And one of my best absolute star performers said in our one-on-one, what does this mean for me? Like, what about my career? Where am I going? What can I do? And I said to him,
thinking that this person you hired from the outside maybe took something they could have had.
Yeah, maybe took an opportunity that he would have had that's mm-hmm. not going to be available to him. And I said, what do you want to do? I said, what would you like to do? I said, there's some options. I said, we're going to need more management. You could manage a team. You could continue in the space you're in because you're crushing it. You could do what this person is doing and be an enterprise rep. That's definitely a path for you. I said another path is you could also be handle major accounts. You've closed some really big deals for us. They're starting to grow. They're taking more time. We get a couple of those, and that could be what you would do full time. What do you want to do? And he said, well, I don't know yet. I don't know. I'm happy where I am right now, but I'm not sure. I just wanted to know that paths were open to me. I said, they're open. And I like having those conversations where that's all he needed to know is that I'm on it. I'm paying attention. I see it. I mm-hmm. haven't forgotten. And that, I want them to have great opportunity. I want them to have great opportunity.
Yeah, within the company, and not by having to go somewhere else.
Yeah, within the company, and I felt very gratified that my former company had their sales kickoff, I guess, within the last month. And I got a text message from a manager who I'd hired there who got manager of the year of the whole company. And she texted me and said, I just want to thank you for this. I could never have gotten here without you. And you were a big part of helping me achieve this. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting, she said, you should know these 3 other people you hired also got, rep of the year, but other people that you had also influenced. And I feel really good about that because it's what I care about. It's what I care about, that they're going, I don't care. Well, I do care that they are, let's say, excelling. I think that's awesome. But I also know with each of them, because I've had these, I know what their paths are on. And I see these, okay, good. That now they've gotten to that next step. Now they're going to go take the next one. Mm-hmm. And I just feel really good about that. That's important to me. So I do bring it up.
Yeah, and I think for people listening, this is really important. And you and I've talked about this before, is that at least I've seen this trend, maybe you've seen it as well, is so many sales leaders sort of dismissing the importance of this one-on-one time. And they're missing the opportunity to do just what you did, is to individually influence somebody, to cement the relationship with the company, especially if they're people that are performing at a trajectory that you want to encourage them to stay on or to improve or to take that performance to the next level in terms of new level of responsibility. That's the one-on-one bonding time that really ties people to an organization, and not saying that in a negative sense, tying, but that ties them emotionally, where they feel that the company is invested in their success as much as they're investing themselves in their personal success and in the success of the company.
Yeah, it can't be underestimated. I was in a conversation I had with our CEO today. I've heard from several of the people on my team in Tel Aviv that sales is in a different building right now as we're growing and expanding. Mm-hmm. And he goes over every day to the building, and he goes and talks to the sales reps, listens, is on the calls, is involved, and he knows them, and he spends time with them, and he listens, and he cares about them. And I said, I just want to +1 what you're doing, because you may not get the feedback that matters, but it matters tremendously. And I'm hearing from it, however many, 5,000 miles away, maybe it's more than that. How far is Tel Aviv? It's a long way.
From Boston?
Maybe it's 8,000. It's a long way.
I'd say 5,000 is probably pretty good, but you talk and I'll look it up.
Yeah, but so to hear people continue to bring it up, it matters. So it matters your frontline manager a lot. I think to know that there are other people in the organization, particularly at the executive level, who know who you are and what you do, and they care about, they recognize your contribution. It's really important.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it's so frustrating to hear people sort of come around and say the other. And I think this is one of the curses of automation, is that we look at data and we think we understand everything about somebody.
Right.
And this is still, we've emphasized time and time again, you and I, in our conversations and other conversations I have on other episodes of Accelerate, it's still a people business.
Correct.
Selling is still a people business, and it works both externally as well as internally. And managers that are not devoting enough time to the mentoring and coaching aspects, and they probably naturally prefer to do the coaching because that means they're engaged and closing the deals for this month and this quarter, and we really coach these guys up really well. But that was all sort of, hey, this is what we need to do right now. It doesn't really have to do with the individual upskilling them or developing their capabilities individually. And if you miss that, then you're going to say, well, why am I having this high turnover? Well, one reason is this.
Yeah, and it's definitely a thrill to close deals and be involved. I mean, it really is. It's a blast. It's also a blast to see your people progress and grow and achieve things that they want to achieve. I mean, boy, that's as thrilling.
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, I think when you have people that you've mentored, that you've helped develop, and they go out and achieve things,
It's fantastic.
Sometimes even more than you've achieved yourself. That's like, wow, that's
amazing.
Glad I had a hand in that.
Yeah, right.
But you give yourself to have a hand in it, or give yourself a chance to have a hand in it if you don't actually engage. And so I think when you think about how you budget your time out in a week, is you just have to be conscious of the fact that you get some amount of time has to be spent in these one-on-one interactions. And you can set the frequency. I mean, for me, especially when I was working in a lot of startups and smaller companies, as sort of as you do, it's sort of integrated with everything you sort of do. Stand behind somebody, listen to some calls, and then, hey, you got a second, let's go stand over here and talk. Or, you always set aside sort of that private time to have a little just one-on-one, just as part of what you're doing. Sort of the old Tom Peters management by walking around. Thing, which is valuable. I mean,
definitely.
I read somebody recently sort of try to denigrate that whole concept, but it is valuable, but doing it more casually. Really, I think there's a real virtue in it. Instead of saying, hey, and there's virtue sometimes too of setting up specific times where you bring people in and you have, one-on-one that you're talking just about them. Sometimes people need that. And you should try to do that monthly, quarterly, whatever sort of the opportunity you have in your organization. But keep the one-on-one things going on a constant basis. Very important.
Yeah, so that there's that focus. I think sometimes the one-on-ones, they just know. I know for my team, when we have one-on-ones, I'm busy during the day, and it's hard to get my time. And when they know that they've got some time carved out, they typically come with a list, which I like. If it's anything urgent or, is time sensitive, though. But I think it also, when they know, okay, I know that I've got this time with her and I can go through these things. I think there's less anxiety because they know, okay, I'm going to have this time and I can be thoughtful about how we talk about these things. And it also, I think the one-on-one, it's, they do have to be more thoughtful. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that also.
I agree. All right, Bridget, we've run out of time for today.
Andy?
Yes, ma'am.
Until next time. Until next time, I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Fantastic.
Friends, thank you as well for joining us, as always, and we'll look forward to speaking with everybody next week.
All right, have a good one.
Friends, thank you for joining me and my guests on this new edition of Accelerate. Join me again next week as I welcome Dr. Chris Kroner to the show. Chris is a clinical psychologist who teaches a science-based approach to hiring top sales candidates. In fact, if you have the time, before the episode next week, check out his book. It's titled Never Hire a Bad Salesperson Again. And of course, as always, my friend Bridget will be joining us as well. So thanks again to our sponsors, CenturyLink and DiscoverOrg, for their ongoing support of Accelerate. I look forward to talking with you again next week.